Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are decoding the mechanics behind an absolute electoral earthquake, the 2026 West Bengal Legislative Assembly election. Whether you've followed Indian politics for decades or you're literally just tuning in right now, we're going to break down exactly how a massive 15-year incumbency finally came to an end. So let's jump right into the data.
Just look at this staggering number, 207. Out of the 294 available seats, this is exactly what the BJP secured. This wasn't just a win. It was a historic landslide that officially ended a 15-year incumbent rule by the AITC, led by Mamata Banerjee. It's the kind of massive electoral reversal that honestly leaves political analysts completely speechless.
And the craziest part? This happened alongside another totally wild number, 92.93%. That is the unprecedented, record-breaking voter turnout we saw during this election. We're talking about over 6.3 crore, or 63 million votes being cast. When turnout jumps this high, surpassing even the historic 2011 elections, it signals a massive undercurrent of public sentiment. So we really need to do a postmortem here. What were the structural and demographic pillars that caused this monumental shift?
Okay, let's dive into this. To solve this political mystery, we're going to unpack 5 specific factors: a historic political landslide, scandals and anti-incumbency, the missing 9 million, security and voter turnout, and finally, the fragmented minority vote.
Part 1. A historic political landslide. The 130-seat swing. And this brilliantly illustrates what a political realignment of this magnitude actually looks like. Notice the steep drop for the incumbent AITC, falling from 215 seats back in 2021 all the way down to 80. On the flip side, the BJP skyrocketed to 207. This 130-seat swing is a real game-changer. It literally resulted in the very first right-wing government in the state since assembly elections began way back in 1937.
Moving on to Part 2, Scandals and Anti-Incumbency, the wait of 15 years.
15 years is a really long time to hold office. And while the early years definitely saw praise for rural development, a whole series of high-profile corruption investigations started to severely cloud the government's image. Just look at this list. You've got the teacher recruitment scam, ration distribution irregularities, and major coal and cattle smuggling cases. Add to that the disruption of rural job schemes because of allegations of cut money, and well, public dissatisfaction just skyrocketed. The entire election started being framed by the opposition as a choice between fear versus assurance.
But honestly, perhaps the most visceral catalyst for change was the deeply tragic August 2024 RG Kar Medical College rape-murder case. The administration's handling of this case sparked massive, unprecedented public mobilizations, especially in Calcutta. And what's absolutely crucial to understand here is that these protests were largely non-political. The tragedy mobilized women voters and huge sections of the historically non-political middle class. It severely strained the ruling party's reliance on their usually popular welfare schemes, like the Women's Monthly Assistance Dole.
Which brings us to Part 3, the missing 9 million, the SIR controversy.
Okay, so this was easily one of the most contentious administrative exercises in modern Indian electoral history. The Special Intensive Revision, or SIR, was an election commission process that deleted over 9.1 million voters from the rolls. That is nearly 12% of the entire electorate, just gone. Millions were suddenly categorized as absentee or deceased. Now, as you'd expect, the political framing of this was intensely polarized. The BJP defended the move as a necessary cleanup of bogus entries and illegal migrants, but the AITC strongly criticized it, arguing that it risked the total disenfranchisement of genuine, living voters.
And this process was anything but smooth. It ended up straight in the courts. Right before the election, judicial tribunals were rapidly disposing of appeals. In fact, out of 1,777 appeals handled by the ex-Calcutta High Court Chief Justice, 1,607 voters were actually restored to the rolls. But the administrative chaos, it caused deep, deep anxiety. This was especially true among groups like the Dalit Hindu Matua community, where many people feared that losing their spot on the voter list wouldn't just cost them their right to vote, but also their access to vital state welfare schemes.
All right, Part 4, Security and Turnout, the Central Forces Effect.
Historically, elections in this region have unfortunately faced allegations of political intimidation and violence. To neutralize those tactics this time around, check out this number, 2,407. That is the number of companies of Central Armed Police Forces, the CAPF, deployed for Phase 1 alone. We are talking about an integrated grid of over 240,000 security personnel deployed right on the ground.
To put that kind of deployment into perspective, normally in India, the police-to-population ratio sits around 1 to 650, but during Phase 1 of the selection, the ratio of armed forces to voters was an astonishing 1 to 100, or even 1 to 150 in some areas. This unprecedented integrated security grid heavily suppressed local strongmen. And the result? It allowed millions of citizens, including a massive wave of out-of-state migrants who returned home just for this election, to cast their vote without fear. This directly contributed to that record 92.93% turnout we talked about earlier.
Now let's look at Part 5, the fragmented minority vote, a fractured fortress.
Now, what's really interesting here is how a critical demographic shift totally dismantled the incumbent party's grip on historically reliable Muslim-majority districts. Notice the massive gap between expectation and reality. Many political analysts fully expected that the anger over the voter roll deletions would cause the Muslim vote to unify entirely behind the ruling TMC as a defensive measure. But reality fractured that vote across multiple opposition parties, including the Congress, the left, and smaller regional outfits like AJUP.
Let's zero in on Murshidabad district to understand this micro-level impact. This is an area with the 66% Muslim population, where the incumbent TMC had previously won 20 out of 22 seats. But look at the 2026 results. The TMC and the BJP actually tied at 9 seats each. Because the minority vote split among the left, Congress, and regional parties, the BJP, riding on a parallel consolidation of Hindu voters, astonishingly jumped from just 2 seats in 2021 to 9 seats in 2026. It truly became a fractured fortress. Finally, Section 6, the aftermath. Suvendu Adhikari's rise to chief minister.
We've seen the anti-incumbency, the huge voter roll controversy, the massive security deployment, and the shifting demographics all culminate right here. Back in November 2025, Suvendu Adhikari, who was actually once Mamata Banerjee's closest aide before turning into a fierce political rival, delivered this incredibly stark warning: Bengal will shake you out of power. Just 6 months later, driven by all the combined catalysts we've explored today, Adhikari was elected as the leader of the legislature party and took the oath as the state's new chief minister, marking a total, historic shift in power.
So, we've unpacked the anatomy of this electoral earthquake. But you know, an event of this absolute magnitude never stays confined to state borders. The fall of a 15-year fortress driven by such complex demographic and administrative factors is bound to send shockwaves across the entire country. So, I'm going to leave you with this to ponder. What does this historic realignment mean for the future of Indian national politics? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you next time.